today we're together with Sue Patterson, who has the website called UnschoolingMom2Mom and the Facebook page also. And we have the pleasure to talk, and today is the time. You have been in the realms in my world of the whole unschooling, and I was like, now it's time. Now I want to know more about who Sue is. So first of all,
Oh, I love
welcome
that.
to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. So Sue, let's start right there. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I am, I'm really a mainstream mom from the suburbs. That's where I started.
Okay.
I did not know that I was going to go on this path. I had my kids in Mother's Day out, and I was working part-time as a nurse, and we were in the military, and school just didn't work. School just was like, this is not fun. This, my little first grader, I would look down the hall and there are these big third graders, when you have your oldest is first grade, everybody that's 8 and up looks huge. And they look like zombies. And they were so, their shoulders hung down and they were not enjoying their learning experience. And I had this little learner that loved everything about learning, and I was watching it shift. And I was like, oh, no, 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 we're not going in this direction. And so I ran into some people that homeschooled. This was the 90s, like 1996.
And whereabouts?
I was in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
And I ran into people who homeschooled, and their kids made eye contact with you. And they were like, I'm like, whoa, what is, and I was at this one thing and I leaned around the corner and her kids were doing dishes in the kitchen and they were shoving soap bubbles in each other's faces like normal kids. And I'm like, oh, this is okay. This is okay. I hadn't really run into other homeschoolers. Well, I had run into one other homeschooling family, and to be honest, they were kind of weird. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this. And so I just started picking her brain, that how could this work? How could this? And they were a traditional homeschooling family. And she said, all kinds of people are coming into it now. And I'm like, oh, I'm probably exactly who she's worried about, but I'm not going to tell her. And so I just gathered. Back then we had to have catalogs because it was only like we had Prodigy, we had old school computer stuff, and it didn't have the information. AOL message boards were going on, but I hadn't stumbled across those yet. And so I gathered some catalogs and I thought, oh, I can like make science fun, or make, I was still in those subject lanes. And how can I sparkle this up a little? And then we were about to move because we were getting transferred from San Antonio to Alaska. And I thought, okay, let's just do this. Let's do this. We'll be up in Alaska. No one will know what we're doing. It'll be fine. And if it doesn't work, we pay taxes. They'll take him back. It'll be fine. So I had a what was he, 6, and then a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I had 3 kids that were pretty young. And I'm like, Michael, don't tell your teacher that we're going to do this. And he, of course, like, he's like me. So he just tells it all. Yeah. And next thing you know, she says, can I talk to you a minute? I'm like, oh no, I'm not ready for this. And she
turned off the oven.
Yeah, she said, Michael says you're gonna homeschool. I'm like, well, we're thinking about it. I kind of like hedged a little. And she goes, well, my sisters were homeschooled and it was fabulous. And I think he'll love it. And I'm like, what? She says, yeah, he wanted to learn about the solar system. And I told him you're going to get that in 4th grade. And I watched him kind of look at how far ahead 4th grade was from 1st grade. And now you can do all the solar system stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So they handed us the packet, when we left school, and it was sealed. It said, deliver this to the school. And I'm like, you're not sealing something about my child. And so I opened it and it was nothing. And we started on that path. And so as we dipped our toes into it and learned that doing school at home is also not fun. and causes a lot of tears and a lot of frustration. And so again, I kept with the picking people's brains. How are you doing this? How are you doing this? And so we met people, and we didn't live too far from, I don't know if you know the Hegners from Home Education Magazine. A long time ago, they were publishers, and they lived near us, and they're like, and all their kids were unschoolers. And so they're 10 years older. You know, they were of the age of people that met John Holt, or that had kids that just snowboard. And you're like, I don't know about that, but and so all of it was just like undoing layers. And so fast forward to today, my kids are all in their 30s. They all have careers and degrees and homes and all the stuff, you know, all the things that you think, I don't know if this is gonna work. and
And you
it
still
did
love
work. It
unschooling.
did work. And so I want to tell people, you don't have to do it like that.
Yeah.
So that's like my whole reason is
Yeah.
I just want people to know they have options, that they don't have to drink some Kool-Aid and become I mean, it's not a weird thing. It's just a natural way to learn, and it will provide what they need. And if you continue to learn more, which is what I'm all about, helping people figure it out, then you can start to conquer some of the fears that are holding you back and some of the misinterpretations about learning. And so when you can do that, then you can connect more with your kids, and the whole unschooling thing just takes off. So we had lots of adventures in between that start and where we are now. We still have adventures.
There is so much to talk about, but I'm really curious about the move from Texas to Alaska.
It was
I mean,
something.
that must have been from hot and sun to a lot of snow. How was that move?
Well, we loved it, actually. Well, actually, to be honest, my husband was to promise me when we went into the military, he would get me to Europe. And his person that makes assignments said, just take her to Europe, but you need this assignment in Alaska. Well, so I'm like a little reluctant because I really wanted to go to England. And so, but we started, and we had our little minivan, and my mom came with us as we drove from San Antonio 3 days across the country, stopping at different places to look at different historic things or cool, interesting locations. And then we ended up in Seattle, which we got on the ferry in Bellingham and took the ferry up to Haines, and then drove 2 more days on through the mountains and into Alaska. Into Anchorage. And
Amazed you did it in 5 days. It's such a long drive.
oh, it wasn't. I mean, it was 3 days to get to Montana, and then another day over to Seattle, and then 3 days on the ferry, and then 2 more days in Alaska. So it was a little while.
Long distance.
And we did that with a lot of the places that we moved, was that we would take like a month between to like figure it out and not be such a rush. And there's a lot of cool things you don't want to miss. So we you know, it was different, and we just saw it all as an adventure. And so that was, I mean, it was way different because my husband and I both grew up in Texas. So we were like
thinking like, wow.
It's quite the contrast to Alaska.
Yeah. It was
But
good though. We loved it. It might have been one of our
living
favorite places.
another culture for some time. We are now immersed in Fresno for 1.5 months, living with unschooling friends and seeing the local culture. And it's just, for Europeans, seeing everybody drive everywhere, it's just wild. You're like, why don't you take the bike? It's only we take the car. It's really
Many things. It's funny because the
it's the small things.
We didn't think the States would feel so
Cultural
different. We
different.
kind of felt we're just we're
Yeah.
here to go out with some friends, and we didn't even think about it as a cultural adventure. And then here we are.
Oh, interesting.
And
Interesting.
it's just, I really feel I'm from another part of the world.
Yeah. Well, we
Mhm.
are going to go to France at the end of April. I'm excited. My first time to Europe. He's finally said, finally,
Yay.
we're going to go.
Uh,
How long are you staying?
Huh?
For how long are you staying in
We're going to
France?
stay for a week, just a week.
Oh,
good. Yeah,
And
but
I know it's
a
not
lot of
enough to,
sites, no, a
we'll
lot
just
of big,
scratch the
small
surface.
city centers. It's really, really
Yeah.
wonderful. It's
yeah.
so
Let us
pretty.
know. We spend a lot of time in France. If we can
Yeah.
help with
Oh,
anything,
okay.
let me know.
I'll
Yeah.
pick your brain because that's what I do. Pick people's brain.
Hey, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I was wanting to follow up on the thing you said about the light in the children's eyes and how it becomes more dim when they enter the school system.
Yeah.
Because I want to go back to the.
Yeah. I was just, it was
We
the
can
wild
talk
loop.
about it.
Fine. It's
It's
fine.
an unschooling podcast. So it's just because I see the same thing. I see that there's a lot of light in the kids' eyes and they are enthusiastic, engaged in life, and with their different tempers, but
Sure.
when they're small, that's how they are in general. And then they enter the system and doesn't take them many years to turn that light off.
No. Well, I mean, when you really look at what they're doing, it's understandable. When you're told you can't do your fun stuff until you do the stuff I tell you, and I promise it's fun, only it's not really fun. And you hear that over and over, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, there she goes, calling that stuff fun again. And it just beats you down. I think that you know, when you're able to explore your interests and move more freely, then you have an opportunity to kind of grow that light. You enjoy your life more than if you're just checking somebody else's boxes. And that's what I think happens in school. I think that's what happens in traditional homeschooling too. And I think that when you're told shelve your stuff until you do what I call important, then it doesn't inspire, and an inspiration kind of comes more when you can partner with them. You like this, so let's grow it. And I think that what happens with unschooling, that what's so great about it is that you find out their interest, and then you have your adult life experiences that you can say, oh, we could do this and this, and this is kind of adjacent. And then it's all trial and error. And it takes a while to step away from, but I got to check the history box and the math box and the English box and all that. But when we start to step away from that, I always think of it as kind of like putting the cart before the horse. If you say, we must have these subjects, and here's how we will plug you into them, versus let's explore these interests. And as I'm deschooling, I will mentally extract the subjects. Then I can calm my fears down because I can see, oh, they did a little English, they did a little history, because that's how we all kind of start, right? We start with what's familiar. And so once we've done that for a while, then we stop extracting because we trust that humans are really hardwired to learn and that they really are going to find what they need with a parent that's helping them navigate.
Very much agree. I'm thinking about something that I find a little hard as an unschooling mom.
Uh-huh.
My kids are not as old as yours. We're like, I don't know, 15 years behind you, maybe.
Okay.
But I don't want to be too judgmental around people who send their kids off to school. I don't want to, just as a fellow human being, talk to
that.
others and say, the light in your child's eyes will die. That's just.
Well, I don't think that that's true, because
So
let
at
me
the
just
moment,
also
I'm
tell
thinking
you,
a lot about how can we, you and I totally agree on the unschooling. I'm on,
right.
we're just,
I get that.
this is an echo chamber kind of, but
Yeah.
I just want to ask you a question. Is there a way, because this is puzzling my mind at the moment, is there a way that we can reach outside of this echo chamber? Can we can we inspire those who are not ready to take the step? Can we help them to keep that light shining in their kids' eyes? Is there a way we can?
I don't know, really, because I remember feeling exactly like that as my kids were growing up and my nephews were all going to school, and I have stepkids that went to school, and I didn't want to badmouth their experience. And here I am now, my grandson, my only grandchild, goes to school. And so I don't want to, I do not believe that if you send your kids to school, their light will be extinguished. I don't believe that. But I do believe that if you send your kids to school and you don't actively parent and you don't actively find fun things for them to do outside of school, and you don't advocate for them when they're in school and something is just like a bureaucratic conveyor belt, I believe it will not go as well. But I believe that if you do those things, then you can make the best of that experience. You can, they can still go to all of that, and you make sure they have this full, rich life with you in your family, and that they know you are partnering with them through it. That child matters more than whether the homework got done. That child matters more than whether the teacher was right and you must. Always remember, you are all your kid really has. And so you have to stand up for them. And I know that it's really an interesting thing watching my daughter send her son to school, because she was the most radically unschooled of all three of my kids. And she went to high school for a year and a half because she wanted to see what it was like. And so my grandson is in, what is he in now? 3rd grade. I was like, what grade is that? And she has these other mothers that also have kids in school, and I watch her with them, and she has such a different perspective. She does not mind calling up the principal and saying, what the heck is going on in that room? Can I have a meeting with you? And saying things like that. You have my child and we will talk about that. She doesn't have that fear of the principal that so many of the other parents that wander through have. And I think it's because she had this unschooled experience. She never had 12 years of being afraid to be called into the authority's office, And so she can navigate this a little bit better because she prioritizes, we're going to do these things, and these are his interests, and we're going forward with that. And I'm picking him up early, and I'm doing whatever, I'm just doing it on our terms within, reason, because you still have to follow enough rules that they don't get kicked out. But you can still pick him up early. Like yesterday was his birthday. He turned 9. And she called and said, what time do y'all do the head count for the, the payment basically that happens for every day that they're there? They're like, well, you do it after first period. She goes, by 9:30, will you have done it? And they're like, yeah. So there she is, 9:30, picking him up for his birthday, Y'all got your money. I need Jackson.
It reminds me of a story from a family we met in Germany at one point. In Germany, homeschooling is illegal, and it's very hard to get around to do it anyway. So so we know a family who likes their personal freedom very much, and also respect the freedom of their children, but they couldn't get around the schooling thing. And they went to the law and found out how much is mandatory.
Right.
This is down to hours.
Okay.
So when the child is this age, it has to be in school that many hours.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And so they told the school, so the child, this schooling is mandatory, and I see that your schedule is 4 hours more a week than the mandatory. So we're going to pick up our child every day at 12 or whatever was the.
Okay. Yeah.
At 12, he's done the mandatory schooling. We'll pick him up. Actually, they started by saying, at 12, he's done with the mandatory. So could you please walk him to the bus stop so he can come home? And they wouldn't do that.
No.
And so they said, okay, I'll use my lunch break at my work to drive to the school, pick up my child and drive him home.
Right.
this is such a radical thing to do. And of course, a lot of conflict arose with the
Of
school.
course.
Always missing English every Tuesday because that's from 12 to 1 or
Right,
whatever. I
right.
don't remember the details, but
Yeah.
I really liked the way this family stood up for their children and
Right.
said, you know, as an unschooling mom, you very often meet people who would say, I wish I could do that, but for me,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
impossible. And very often you think, yeah, well, you know, maybe you could if you really wanted to. But in
Right.
Germany,
It's harder.
you actually can't.
Right, right.
And I
I
like
do know families that have done like umbrella school type
they
things
do
when
that.
they're
I
there.
do know German families who get
Yeah.
around it. But I also know that if you live in a
It would
small
really
village,
be hard. It takes a lot.
but if the authorities figure out that you're there and your kids are not in school, then there is not much getting around it.
Right, right.
So this is what happened to this family. And I respect that, you know, they just, you know, it would have been leaving the country or sending the kids.
Right, right,
This
right.
So, but I like the way that they would stand up for
Mhm,
the
mhm.
personal freedom of the child. We
Yeah.
have to obey some rules, like your daughter picking up at 9:31 because
Right, right, right,
I
right.
like that. I'm not sure everyone
It takes a personality type to be
does.
able to do that.
but
And she had
I
that
think
because when she went to high school for that year and a half, she would text me and say, oh, this girl is going to beat me up in the bathroom. And I'm like, well, I'll be at the back door. And she walks out the back door. Or I bring lunch for her and her friend and they come out the back door and get it. And so she had that like modeled that we will do this on our terms and see how that goes. But you know what? You made a good point about how do we bridge this gap with the majority of the world that is sending their kids to school, and then we're doing this other thing. And I think that in hindsight, when I look back, I think we don't always have to bring it up in conversation. We can look for the common ground. We try to find that. We invite their kids to come with us on cool field trips or on interesting activities when they have spring break or after school or Saturdays or something like that. And we allow everybody free choice. You want the free childcare, go for it. You know, I mean, I say that among unschoolers. I would not say that to my friends who have their kids in school. You want the free childcare? I wouldn't say that. But I also think that we have to be careful that in an attempt to be harmonious, that we don't totally quiet our voice. That we still, and so that's why I don't mind being loud and vocal about unschooling specifically. A lot of people are like, well, you know, they have a lot of problems with it. Like, because I feel like the pendulum can get to the middle, but somebody's got to stand over on the other side to swing it, you know?
What you're saying reminds me of the way eco-villages have worked for many years. In my professional career, I've been responsible for an organization called Gaia Education, both as the marketing director, and then I took a turn as interim CEO. But what was really interesting about eco-villages, and if you want, well, the goal of this organization is to make sustainability educations, to change the world, more should live in harmony with nature and all that. But I was sitting there looking at the numbers, and in my mind, I'm like, well, I don't think we can get everybody to live in an eco-village, even though people maybe wanted to do it. But the more I got in depth with it, it is fascinating that a lot of eco-villages actually see themselves as living laboratories. It is people who comes from the academic world who have a big passion for they want to live in this sustainable world in union with nature, and they document everything.
Right.
So they actually produce so much knowledge that you can extract learnings from more than 40 years of people living in eco-villages and saying, how can we then use this knowledge for everybody else?
Right.
And I think that we are at a point with unschooling where all these nerdy, a lot of them are women who sits on so much unschooling knowledge. There have been written books, but I'm like,
We're like the petri dish.
yeah, and there needs to be a work done soonish, and maybe it's already is. There's people who have read John Hall's books and Peter Gray books and etc., who are not in the homeschooling, unschooling world, but have taken knowledge from it. But I can just see that there is, and maybe we are more yet these petri dishes, as you say, that we so much knowledge is learned on going back to a way of being parents that was normal earlier in our.
Maybe it's one of those things that when we do a cross section of time, and this is what we see, over a longer arc, things will change. In that, for instance, my daughter sending her child to school, but doing the experience differently. It takes multiple generations of people having the courage to stand up to stuff, to advocate for children. We already see that a lot of child advocacy has changed over the past 30 years. And that's continuing. We don't see such a, I mean, we still see a lot of anti-gentle parenting or anti-attachment parenting, but not as much. And, you know, we want to see it move faster, but the needle doesn't move fast. You know, I guess that's the thing. That's the thing I know as a 63-year-old woman. The needle does not move fast.
I can see my own needle from
Yeah.
with our firstborn. She was in private school, and I remember, you know, her asking me about stuff, and my answer to her was, "Go ask your teacher." It
Right.
was not taking the responsibility of helping her or guiding her. To now, I'm like, "Go ask your mom." No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
How do or
Unless it's
Google it.
something I know.
Google it.
Yeah,
You'll tell her,
Google it.
go
Yeah,
Google
yeah.
it.
No, but I
Smartphone. Why don't you just look it
Right.
up?
What do we need to know anything more?
no, but joking aside, then I can see how I has changed as a parent
Yes,
to take on the
absolutely.
responsibility of what's going on in my child's life, and that is on every level. Where earlier I was in a mindset I had inherited of, you kind of outsource these things,
Right.
and that is the big change I really would love to see. No matter if people homeschool, unschool, it's this: hey man, it's your child.
Well, and
It's
I think
responsibility.
that we'll see that in the, because everybody knows a homeschooler now. And as we get a little bit further along, everybody knows somebody doing homeschooling kind of in a weird, creative way. They may not know the word unschooling, or they may not even like the word unschooling, but they start to see that these people are in their community, and they're not as, they're making different choices, but they're not as far removed, somebody you read about over in West Virginia or something. And I think that, so then when the parents who have kids in school finally come up to something that their kid is so not thriving, they don't feel like, I've got no choice. They're like, I want to talk to that lady over there, because somehow her kids are all right, and they stepped away. And what did it take to step away? And I think that it was just, you know, a random thing that happened that I would run into somebody, but it is not so random anymore. It's a lot more common for somebody to run into. I even have friends of my daughter's friends, who I make this strewing calendar that is where every day of the month has a celebration. And so I give them links and stuff like that. And it's really helpful for people that are deschooling as they're moving away, you know, to start to see that learning is everywhere. You don't have to go to school to get the learning. And some of my daughter's friends subscribe to it while their kids are in school, because they just put the calendar up. Oh, parfaits for breakfast. Let's have it. Or, oh, it's penguin day. Let's do it. And because their kid happens to be interested in penguins. And so I think that that's part of that graying the areas between. It's not so separate as it maybe was 30 years ago.
I also think that on the one hand, I think that there is nothing like unschooling. You can't unschool in the weekends. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, a lot of the inner work that we have to do as unschooling parents, if you do that without being an unschooling parent, you will still become a very much better parent.
Right.
And you will also become a very much better advocate for your child who has to go to school for whatever
Right.
reason.
Right.
Um,
Just more connected.
yeah, and making it a more free experience.
Right.
I remember, I haven't thought about that for a long time, but I remember when my mom was not homeschooled.
Mhm.
She was homeschooled for a year and a half or 2 years while living in another country as a child, but otherwise she was normally schooled.
Right.
But she did advocate for me when I was a school child in the way that she would very often say, all the other kids are stupid if I didn't like them.
Yeah.
She would very often say, don't pay attention to that teacher. He's a whatever. She would use some
Mhm.
swear
Mhm.
word.
Right.
She would say, if I didn't like the homework, she would say, but that's ridiculous anyway. She was very,
See, I think these little things
but
help. They move us along, you know?
somehow it gave me some
Yeah,
freedom.
a little bit of oomph.
Yeah, yeah, it just gave me space. And I think if she had been more conscious about what she was actually doing, saying those things, because I think it was genuinely just her opinion.
Right.
That she thought it was bullshit, but she didn't have a big parental philosophy behind it. She just thought, that's just a waste of time. And if you don't like math, whatever, I don't like math either. I'm happy anyway. She was straightforward. And I think if you, in a conscious way, do the inner work and peel off the layers and, put the horse and the
Uh-huh.
wagon, did you use?
Cart before the horse, or horse
Yeah,
before
if you
the
put that in the right order and maybe forget about that cart and go horseback riding just for fun, you can do that and get very far in the journey as a parent.
And I
And
think we have to remember too, though, that a lot of people don't want to do the internal work. And
yeah.
that's okay too. Everybody has their baggage, everybody has their own mountain to climb. And I don't feel judgy about that. I don't really feel judgy about any of it. I feel like everybody's doing the best they can.
Well, but I
And
think what you said about the gray area, because I think sometimes the unschooling world is there's a very strict and clear line between the unschooling and the not unschooling, and as
yeah,
if it's a
not in
waste
my
of
world
time
though.
to
Not
listen
in
to
my
this.
world.
No.
I just, and that's how Unschooling Mom to Mom came to be. It was just too rigid for me and my tastes. And I did not like jumping on the bandwagon to tell somebody they weren't unschooling right, or I just didn't like it. I thought, I did not leave one PTA to join another one.
No.
And so Unschooling Mom to Mom came to be as kind of a kinder, gentler way to help parents see that this really will work. And it really isn't neglectful or unparenting or all the things that you may hear in the homeschooling world. And you don't have to do anything that doesn't make sense to you. It's just not a good idea. It's a good idea to learn more and unpack your fear and figure out, where am I doing something because I'm overtired, or I just don't have the bandwidth to explore more. Okay, then that's where you stop. I thought of it a lot as you're on one side of the river and they're on the other side. And you're like, it's really okay over here. And but if they stop at the island on the way across the river, it's all right. They're still a little better than they were if they'd just stayed with their head buried in the sand on the other side of the river. And so a little bit, who knows? Who knows? Just because right now they need the island, that doesn't mean 2 years from now they won't be standing right over here. Or they might, I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of places for people to be that you don't have to say unschooling this way, everything else bad.
Mm.
No, unschooling this way and it works. But if you can't get there, or you don't want to get there, or you have a spouse that's against it, or you have all kinds of trauma that you still are working through, go where you need to go, but know that you can advocate for your kids and be more present, and you don't have to just follow the status quo.
That's beautiful. I said exactly that to a client yesterday, actually. Usually I'm a big advocate for unschooling, and she was
Me too. So am I.
But the context that she was in, she said, I want to be an unschooler, I don't dare. And then she told me her entire story. And I said, I think you should keep doing what you're doing. Because the pressure she was under from other things was like, this is not the time to change it. And no one's suffering. They all liked the homeschooling. Kids are happy. Everyone's happy. They're thriving. They're having fun with what they're doing. It's in a school homeschooling structure with a curriculum and a plan, and but whatever, if everyone's sometimes it's the right advice to give to someone to actually not take the step, not right now.
Sometimes almost unschooling is okay. And I think that sometimes when there has, and this is certainly what my experience was, that as we were learning about it, there was such an anti-unschooling push. So then that made those that are happy with unschooling push back. And so when that was happening, it was because sometimes it had to do too, some of that real strident rhetoric was because it was happening online. And because sometimes the way you write is not the way you would say it if you were talking to someone over coffee. But somebody, but you also have the speed of the internet. So I'm thinking of like the email lists that happened in the 90s, and the speed, and somebody, but what about, and you're like, it's good. and so then things can be taken out of context, or you can get caught up in it. And, it doesn't have to be so black and white. You were saying you can't unschool on the weekends. You can if you want. It's not going to give you the same benefit as if you unschooled 7 days a week. But if you're unschooling, you're implementing that kind of stuff on the weekend,
you're definitely taking steps in that direction.
It's a step. You're just somewhere along the path, because I know where you start is not where you end. Where you begin is not where I am now.
There will be
if only I could take the parenting information and knowledge that I have now and use it on my kids.
Oh, give me that. Please.
I wish. I wish, but it doesn't work like that, because we're evolving too. We have never parented a child this age in a society that is doing what it's doing now. And okay, so everything is an experiment. So I always tell my membership group, everything is an experiment. Try it for a week, see what parts you like, what parts you don't like, and then reevaluate. And tell your kids you're doing it. Tell your kids, well, let's give it a try and see how this works.
Yeah. So what about an unschooling dad to dad? Are we actually not enough dads out there soon that some of us should do something?
What do you mean?
I'm just trying with this podcast to also be a male voice in the choir who is very feminine dominated. And it is because in the most families, it ends up being the man who is working and the mom at home. And I also believe there's some biological stuff going on. I am less interested in my children than my wife is. She's the primary parent on so many levels. And I see dads out there growing in that direction, but it most often comes from the mom.
But is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem. Absolutely not.
Well, and it is, I have had this conversation often because of the name of my Unschooling Mom to Mom. And so they're
Wow.
like, our dad's not welcome. And I'm like, dads are welcome. Dads are welcome. I'm happy to have it. You know, in every park they ever went to, there were one or two dads, one or two. You know, when I look at my Instagram percentages of the demographics, 98% are women.
Yep.
They just are. And so I have often said it's a mother's movement, because it just is. We looked at our kids and we said, nah, it's not good enough.
Yep.
And we took steps in that direction. And the fact that our society says that women are more in charge of the child raising, somebody else's society may not. But this is where I live. This is what I have to deal with. And so, for instance, my husband, who was not super into it, didn't really want to read a book about it, you know, and I would just like follow him and read a couple of lines from John Taylor Gatto. Like, did you know? Da, 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 da. He's like, and then, and so somebody, who was his name? Skylar something, and he wrote Unschooled Dads. And so Ron, my husband, was one of the older dads of the people that he kind of surveyed. And he said, and so I said, okay, just tell me what you think about it and I'll type it. And so he's like, well, I think that what happened was I trusted you. And in a relationship, if you don't trust them, that's a whole nother issue. But I trusted that if you found it was working, you would move in that direction. And if you found it wasn't working, you would modify it. And we would talk about it, and that you were more educated in it than me. And I was okay with that. And my job was to do the things I wanted to do. You wanted to learn more about education and learning and children and parenting. And I wanted to take them on a ship in the San Francisco Bay. And I did. Or I wanted to be one of the volunteers that took the kids to climb a mountain or do, you know, different. So then he just started listing off, like, if we had not been allowed to pursue what you wanted to pursue, they would have never. And then he just started listing off all the cool experiences he got to have with them. And that may be what is the motivation for dads in our society.
Yeah.
And okay, you know, everybody brings their own.
You
You gave him a funny look. Why did you give him a funny look?
No, he's
just crying.
he's getting emotional.
Yeah.
Okay,
because
you
know
But it's okay. I mean, no, but that's it. I mean, the experiences I've had with my children because we have taken this direction.
Oh my God.
Man, I'm so grateful.
Right.
So there's a little joy here.
That's okay. You know what? That's fabulous, because I'm glad you've had those experiences.
Oh, yes, man.
And I'm sad for people that haven't had those experiences, or that don't know that they could have those experiences. You know, you just have to set your priorities differently.
And also, I think if you have, not all families work like that, but many families in unschooling work like the mom is the unschooling, I don't know, major force, and the dad does some other stuff, usually breadwinning,
Right.
and is less interested in the day-to-day activities and, you know, the flow of the home kind of thing. And sometimes I know that Jesper gets a little, I don't know, envious maybe almost.
Yeah.
Relation to the kids, and why are they always talking to me about stuff? And, you know, why do I get to, sometimes you say you just sit and talk, but that's basically my job.
But you know what?
But
that's
now
that's why, I mean, I don't mean to, but that's why they come to her.
Yeah, I know.
Because you're not in a rush to get to an activity.
No, no. And yesterday I had such a wonderful talk with our 15-year-old daughter
Wow,
because
yeah.
Cecilia was out walking. So whatever she had on her mind, she
She
came
was
to me,
otherwise
and I loved it.
disposed.
So I'm like, get out of the house some more.
No, you
So
wouldn't
that I'm
really.
the only alternative they have.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can't be.
I
But
want to
you
be
know what? You'll just have a
happy more.
different relationship with
I
them.
know,
I
I
think
know, I
that
know.
that's the key. Like my kids, they still text my husband movie lines. Like they'll start a movie line and you have to guess, do you know what the movie was? And they started that as kids. They would do that. They would say a line at the dinner table and then somebody would say the next line. I was usually not even aware of what they were talking about, because it just wasn't like, but my husband, that was his thing. And they were doing like all these crazy Western movies that he had watched with them, and they would know all the movie lines. And, um, so that became the connection point. And so you look for connection points to have with them that allow that to work. You're not going to duplicate what your wife has. You're going to have your own thing.
Absolutely.
That's what made you cry a moment ago, because you've had such a great experience as a father, even though your experience is not mine. You're doing it in a different way, and
Oh,
you've
yeah.
been
Right?
working, and you've been not available in many different forms
Right.
over years because of the breadwinning thing. But it's not like it isn't amazing. I remember when we began, he would tell me after a few months, maybe, that coming home from work on an ordinary Tuesday, that's back when you had an office job. Now he's working from home. But back then he said, now coming home from work, it's like weekend every time. I come home and it feels like Saturday.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
That's funny.
And the kids, they have some energy left. They want to talk to me. They're full of happiness and joy. They're sharing what they did today. Maybe sometimes we just meet in the park after work.
Right.
There's
Right.
no
And I
bedtime.
think that that's a good thing too, from your perspective, from the mom perspective, is how can you include them more? How can you set it up so that we're going to have dinner at the pool? and so you come straight to the pool after work, or I'm going to text, we're going to do a quick video on the phone. Hey, Dad. And just so that he feels part of it, or she, because I know lots of dads who's the wife is the one that's working, and you still want to include those people. They're still a parent, that want to connect with their kids.
Yeah,
And
and I think that is one of the things we have learned a lot about during the whole parenting, unschooling journey we have been on, is how important the connection is. And also to look at how can you connect around something that isn't necessarily your interest or your child's interest, but it's a one you have together.
right.
So as it you create these spaces, and it's my advice to some dads out there would almost be go technical on it. Like say to yourself, I need to have a connection with my different children, and what can I find that we both are interested in? Okay, let's do that. Because we maybe don't do it as natural as mom do, and we might need to structure ourselves a little more. I know I could do that from time to time, like, oh, have you remembered you should connect around this? The periods when I look back where I draw a lot of stuff together with our daughter, our connection was so much better in that period than periods where we didn't. So
Right.
it's how do you work in those
Well,
things?
because that's when those conversations happen, right? When you're side by side putting something together, they're like, well, this happened. And all of a sudden, then you have that free flowing connection.
And I think some dads like myself need to be a little more scheduled about it. It's like to
Well,
remember.
and I think too that it sometimes feels like rejection. It's sometimes, and so how people deal with that, like, I feel like you're connected with mom, so that's a rejection of me, so I will reject. And that's not a way to grow closeness. That's, if you think about it, if you're trying to have more connection, don't reject. Just try to take your ego out of it so that you can, what can I do? How can I, send me a text, send me a FaceTime video, make a picture for dad, something. It usually doesn't take a lot. It just takes thinking about it. And it's funny you said about Saturdays. When my first blog that I wrote, like back in the early 2000s, was called A Life Full of Saturdays.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but that's how it felt in the
Yeah,
beginning.
absolutely.
I think it's a very good headline. Take your ego out of it.
Yeah.
And I also want to challenge the gendered
Yeah.
version of this song, because it can go wrong on so many
Oh,
levels.
absolutely.
Our family, that's how it is, and
Yeah.
in other families it's how it is, but it's not always like that.
No.
And I was thinking about it because our oldest son, now 18, if you ask him what are your core values, he can spit them out. Like, you can wake him up in the middle of the night and he can say, what's your core values? And you can ask him, and how do you go about making sure you live those core values? And he can spit that out as well. I was quite impressed when he did it. And one of the things he does, actually, every day, I realized on a random conversation I had with him, he told me, oh, but every day I make sure I have a little activity or at least conversation with each and everyone in our family. And if we co-live with someone, I make sure I go about everyone as well, even the dogs.
Interesting.
So, like, in the
But
afternoon,
it's a personality, right?
did I really
That's
talk
like,
to my brother today, or did I not? Did I pet the dog? It's like, it's just ticking the little boxes.
and
it-
that's interesting, because then that being will grow up to be an adult that has a circle of people. You know, when they talk about you stand on the shoulders of the people before you.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, he's stood on your shoulders and someone will stand on his shoulders. And that's how that arc progresses, right?
And that's a very non-ego based
Yeah.
strategy. It's just a rule he has, like brushing his teeth kind of thing, that he might enjoy his book or his game or whatever he's doing, but then he goes through that list. Hey, wait a minute, I have a moment now and I didn't talk to my mom today. Let me just get up and ask if we could cook the dinner together or whatever. And then he shows up, and when he told me, I realized, oh yeah, he systematically does this.
Wow.
You know,
That's
shows
interesting.
up for the people that, because one of his core values is to have good relations. Smart guy.
Yeah.
Guy. That's
Very.
why I started thinking about it. This is my son, not one of my
Yeah.
daughters. It is my
Right.
son.
Did something right.
He's doing something right. Don't.
Yeah.
But you also created an environment for that seed to grow. You know, you got to give yourself a little, you created it, the environment that allowed that
Yeah.
to not be squashed out, to not be that personality emerges at 30 after he's, you know, gotten over all the other stuff like most people. And yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it is.
I would like to ask you, what would you suggest to the parents out there on the journey, or they're like maybe scratching the surface and are thinking this homeschooling, unschooling, gentle parenting, what's it's all about? What are your recommendations?
How do you start?
How do you start? Well, as a matter of fact, I have a YouTube channel.
Yay.
And I was just recording before I started talking with you. I'm doing this little three or four videos of how to start, like really how to start. Like, how do you find the others that are out there? How do you tap into community? How do you know about the laws? And then how do you figure out about learning? How do you start to break away from a school approach, which is just one approach to tackling gathering knowledge? And then the last part is really about how do you continue your own knowledge journey? Because how you start, you have a lot of fear, and fear keeps you from looking at everything. It puts these blinders on you so that you just got your fear and that's all you're focused on. And then you conquer that fear, and then you can start those blinders can get wider and wider so that you could maybe look at something else. And so if we know that we're going to have this learning process for all of parenting, you know, I think of parents as we're deschooling. It's our problem to deschool, to get that school mentality at least to a dull roar so that we have room for other things. And our kids, what they have is to learn how to handle freedom, to learn how to navigate freedom. And it's a different path, but they coexist, and one allows for the other. And so I think that how I would tell parents is find some other people, listen to podcasts, find other people that are thinking differently about learning. Don't try to simply do it like somebody else. Realize that individualizing is really about you and your kids, not them and copying that. That's a leftover from school, that where you are in your class ranking and how you compare to other people. None of that's even going to be relevant anymore. Not only is it not relevant from that standpoint, but school is kind of becoming irrelevant as the internet grows, as YouTube channels become available. There are so many cool ways to learn about history just from watching funny videos about history. And there are a lot of ways that kids can learn that we have to open our minds to. And I think that as parents who are tapping into YouTube and things like that ourselves, all of a sudden we see, oh, I didn't have to sign up for a class. I could just put it on a YouTube search, and now I know how to unclog the toilet, or now I know how to do something. I didn't have to go to the library on Thursday to learn it. I could learn it. I could sit and watch a movie and say, where have I seen that guy before? And I look it up. And so we realize that we're in this different era of information and availability. And I think that school is going to be kind of marginalized a little bit as more available information is out there.
Well,
It's
so
huh?
I said, let's hope so. I don't know how.
Well, and even if it's not, because we still have people that are not, for whatever reasons, they don't really want to step away from the status quo. Some people like to step away from the status quo. Other people, not so much. And they have been conditioned to conform, and they conform, and they really conform well. And so that's their achievement. And okay, it will be there for you. I would love it if regular school was like community college, where you take the classes you want to take and you go when you want to go, and you learn what you want to learn. And that is what the internet has started to be, that you don't have to go to the community college.
But we have to get over the idea of the curriculum, and we have to get over the idea of the exam, because, the whole paperwork thing. And maybe, with the curriculum, we have to get over the idea of someone else knowing better what you need to know than yourself.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. Well, and I think it helps that when as adults, when we look at what did we really need? What do I really need? And how much math or science or language arts, or what do I really diagram sentences? No. Do I really need to know sines and cosines? No. And when you start to break down some of those things, you're like, well, ratio and proportions, I kind of needed that. And so as that shows up in real life, then that's what you share with your kids. It's kind of like pulling the string on the sweater, that the more you pull it, the more it unravels.
And then it becomes sort of a mess, but you can clear it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we have to schedule a second talk.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
I'm tiring out, but it's very interesting.
Yeah.
How do we do it?
Then what we do is saying, Sue, it is time for people who wants to know more about you, that you share with them how they can find you and how you can help them on their journey.
I would love to help them. And I have the UnschoolingMom2Mom.com website has everything, where you could get into my membership group, which is a group of parents that are at all different places on the unschooling path. And we have weekly coaching calls, twice a week actually, and a huge library of PDFs and recordings, things to help you basically on what your obstacle is for unschooling. So I love my membership group as the best, lowest priced way to really surround yourself, immerse yourself in unschooling. There are also guides. I've made little $15 guides for different topics, like what about socialization? What about technology? What about typical days? Things that are the usual questions that I've heard over 30 years. So if you want to dive into something like that, that's an easy DIYer kind of way to do it. And there I have a couple of courses. That one is to get started unschooling. Another is about learning math without a curriculum. You know, over 30 years, I'm kind of a maker. So I make a lot of things. And you can always just hop on the phone with me and I have a calendar that I talk with people and help them. A lot of people just even do like once a month. We have a little 30-minute check-in. And that's kind of nice too. So reach out, coaching@SuePatterson.com. You can email me. Or you can tap into it over at the website.
We will put the links in the show notes.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank
Watch
you.
your videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's
Sounds
also a good
good.
place to start.
That's a good place.
So thanks a lot for your time. It was a time both with learning, laughing, and crying, and then it ticks all my boxes of
My little walk down memory
wonderful
lane.
moments. So it was wonderful connecting with you. And
Thank you for inviting me. It was lovely for me too.
Was.
okay, bye.
Bye-bye.